1. I work in an airport bar and restaurant. We pay to use the airport's internet infrastructure for our wired devices, and they don't allow us to have any form of Wi-Fi in the pub, because they make a fair bit of money charging people that use more than the free 1 hour they provide. The coverage they provide is also relatively terrible and drops out a fair amount. Normally we have 2 managers and shift leaders per shift for morning and afternoon, and then just 1 closing manager. On this particular day, I happened to be the closing manager, and one of my colleague friends had been running the afternoon without a second manager. I decided that as I hadn't eaten that day, I'd rock up an hour early, shove some grub down my gullet as quick as I could, and start a little early to let my colleague go for a smoke, as she probably wouldn't have been able to go for one all day. My timing was fine, but as I approached the front of the pub, the front was sealed off with these folding portable screens that the airport keeps for emergencies. WTF has happened here, my brain inquires. I stop to speak to our entry host, and he tells me that he's stopping people coming in, as a man is having a heart attack just behind the screens on the tables that lead into the pub. Well, I guess I should probably forget the grub, get changed and get on shift. My afternoon colleague is relatively new to the role and looks quite visibly shaken. Apparently the guy collapsed 20 minutes ago, and you can hear them working on him to try and save his life. People had been leaving via a side door, and we hadn't been letting new customers in, so it wasn't busy. And I told my colleague I'd take over and she could go sit down, have a smoke, do whatever she felt she needed to help settle her a bit. About 20 minutes later, the air ambulance has arrived at the airport, and the paramedics have now joined the airport's fire service, performing CPR and, I believe, deploying a defibrillator, which is ultimately fruitless. At this point, with half the shift having left due to seeing most of this unfold and being quite traumatized, a gentleman decides to stop me and ask for the Wi-Fi connection. I explained how we don't have our own, and it's just the airport's own wishy-washy Wi-Fi that's available, and he gets irate with me that I should sort out their Wi-Fi and make sure that someone high up knows that he's not satisfied with the connection and having to pay for it as well. It was a very, bruh, seriously moment, but I managed to politely apologize and walk away, biting my tongue. I related this to the door host, who was still turning people away because the paramedics were gathering the deceased gentleman's belongings together and preparing to move him out of the side door. The door host then removed any remaining faith I had in humanity by informing me, "About 15 minutes ago I turned a bloke away telling him we have a critical emergency taking place right now, so unfortunately we're closed at the moment." Apparently the guy's response was, "Spare a moment to get my fucking fish and chips now." During all of this, I was trying to get in touch with my pub manager because we'd missed the busy dinner portion of the evening, and as such we wouldn't be making any money from reopening, and that half the staff has left in a very bad way, including the 2 closing staff members I had as my team for the last few flights. Pub manager eventually phoned me back, after about 2 hours of trying to contact him from arriving on site, to tell me to reopen. It's not that bad and we can still take a little bit of money at least. All of this after I had gotten confirmation from the airport's deputy manager and the company's on-call area manager that it would be better for us to close for the evening. This didn't sit well with a fair amount of the staff, as you can possibly imagine, and my manager colleague still dislikes him strongly for this. 2. This is for my last job in front of house before I went back to school and switched entirely to back of house. It's a Fort Lauderdale restaurant that went out of business years ago, but their premise was entirely about meatballs. Everything was meatballs. I was there for maybe 2 months before I had to leave because it was such a crapshoot. From the start, honestly, there were so many red flags. I applied the same day as another girl who happened to have a lot more front-of-house experience than I did. I wasn't inexperienced, and I'd actually worked in another restaurant owned by the same umbrella company, so that worked in my favor. But before any interview, before they even looked at our resumes and applications, the shift leader walked out and looked us over. He told the other girl that they would be in touch, interviewed me for maybe 5 minutes, and offered me the job. I never saw her again. Near as I can tell, the only reason for that was because I was a petite blonde in a cute but certainly not interview attire sundress, while the other girl was in full blacks, pants and button-up plus slip-grip shoes, and happened to be overweight. It struck me as off, but I needed the job, so I counted my lucky stars because I'd used the last of my money to pay for parking to apply. I started working there the next day. As mentioned, I'd already worked at another restaurant within the company, so I knew all of their steps of service already. I just needed to learn the menu. That company has a very specific training manual that all their restaurants adhere to. 8 days of training. Day 1 is shadowing and learning the table numbers. Day 2 is app knowledge and shadowing. Day 3, you can take 1 table under the person training you. Day 4, you're running 2 tables. Day 5 is food running and expo. Day 6 to 8, you have a small section of 3 tables total, but your tips go to the trainer who is shadowing you. On my first day, I was paired with a woman who, for whatever reason, decided she didn't like me. I wasn't able to train at all. She just kept making me do her side work ahead of time, and then shouting at me for not magically being in 2 places at once. I kept trying to tell her it was my first day, but she said it didn't matter, and I would never make it here. I was with her again on my second day, and had only gotten the menu knowledge packet the night before. She had me taking tables throughout the shift, and then yelled at me every time I had to stop to ask a question, because I didn't want to have the wrong information. By the end of my second training shift, I knew I needed to learn it all on my own because she was not going to help train me. She seemed intent on making me quit. Day 3. I noticed the shift leader, the one that interviewed me, looking at my ass while I was doing roll-ups in the back. Then he started inviting me out to various bars in the area, all of which came to a screeching halt with his politeness doing a full 180 the second I mentioned my boyfriend. Days 4 through 7. My trainer called in sick, so they had me start doing expo early to learn the menu. Which, honestly, I was so thankful for because even with the menu knowledge, all the meatballs looked the same. It was the garnishes I had to learn in order to tell them apart, and I was still really confused about the table numbers. So expo and food running ultimately made me learn it all. Day 8, my trainer comes in and shadows me for 1 table. The manager asked her if I was ready to take the test and be a server. Right in front of me, she tells him that she thinks I'm lazy and that I have no menu knowledge whatsoever, but that by then it was a waste of time to keep training me. So the assistant manager and another server sat down to have me do my test. As mentioned, I already knew all the steps of service for that company, and by then I had the menu knowledge and the table numbers down, no thanks to her. I aced my test. My trainer was pissed, but she couldn't do anything about it, so I graduated and got my own fancy little section. Whenever a problem table came in, I would get stuck with them, and I was told that this was part of the usual hazing, and I just had to deal with. Weirdly enough, every single one of these tables ended up requesting me again after because, I don't know, old people just love me for some reason. Unfortunately, that also meant I got stuck with every French Canadian we got, and there were a lot. Snowbirds love Fort Lauderdale just as much as they love not tipping. Weirdly, I had one particular table that eventually told me they specifically requested me over and over because at end of service, I always said, "Get home safe." Like, imagine the bar being so low that someone telling you, "I hope you don't die tonight," is awe-inspiring enough to keep coming back. A week in, we got a scathing review on Yelp about how the girls at the restaurant don't put in any effort, because there was a bartender and the mean trainer lady who sometimes elected not to wear makeup. There was no rule about us wearing makeup. We always wore our uniforms clean and wrinkle-free, hair up, faces clean, whether we wore makeup or not. I didn't like the trainer much, but I was furious that the manager started enforcing that women in front of house had to at least wear some makeup. Of course, the guys didn't have to wear it though, because that would be weird and overstepping, right? I don't leave my house without mascara and cover-up, but that's my choice. It just felt so skeevy. Add to that the fact that the restaurant was one giant pun about balls and testicles. Our jeans had to be tight-fitting, skinny fit, our shoes had to be red Converse, our shirts were literally see-through, and we were penalized if you could see our undershirts through them, but not penalized if you could see our bras. Fridays and Saturdays were hellish because our high tops were filled with skeevy guys from local unis who would either cherry-pick the hottest server to sit in their section, or they'd spend the whole time making dumb jokes about how much we like balls in our mouths. I'm not really a person who is comfortable showing off my body, so I was getting a lot of flack from my managers and shift lead toward the end, because I always had an undershirt on. My makeup was minimal for work, which, honestly, according to food safety guidelines, I shouldn't have been wearing any at all. But whatever, not like anyone listens to that. And while I was always friendly, I never flirted or pretended to be interested just for tips. No shade if that's what you do, it's just not me, and I'm not going to pretend like that if it makes me uncomfortable. Regardless, despite doing everything according to corporate guidelines, with the managers and their new policies, I wasn't up to snuff. Towards the end of my second last month, we got an audit. I didn't know it was an audit. It was a super busy Friday night. We had no tables, so the hostess made out one of a table from the back with one chair in a stuffy corner by a door, where this poor woman could barely be heard. I gave her the same service I give everyone. A week later, one of the company owners came in with the audit papers and sat down with us for our pre-shift meeting. He read through the form line by line, outlining what the customer said and why what the mysterious server had done was perfect. He specifically used the word perfect. He went on to say how every audit at that restaurant up until then had never passed above an 88% before exclaiming that the mysterious server would have gotten a perfect 100% if it was just service being graded, so the total score was a 96%. The only points taken away were from the hostess for seating them in a loud and uncomfortable corner, as well as for breaking some type of fire marshal rule because they were partially blocking an exit. At the end, he announced who the mysterious server was and asked them to raise their hand. I raised mine, he shook my hand and gave me a little gift card to use at any restaurant within the company, and then left, and we continued our pre-shift. I was so thrilled. Positive reinforcement makes me so freakishly happy. I can take a lot of shitty pay and shitty customers, but if one of my bosses recognizes and appreciates my work, I'll power through just about anything. I was all smiles, but as soon as the guy left, my assistant manager lights into me about how a 96% is not a 100%, not to let it go to my head, that it was a fluke, and he could recall that someone else was at the table, despite it being my name on the audit. That table wasn't even in my section, it wasn't in anyone's section. It happened to be that I noticed no one greeted the table, so I got their drink order and asked who I was passing it off to, only to be told by the hostess that I could have it. Everyone else ignored the table, so I don't know what this guy was on about. It sunk my mood for the rest of my shift, and then I was asked to clock out and stay late to help with side work because we were short-staffed, and I needed to take one for the team. I put in 4 hours off the clock that night. Then I went home and told my boyfriend I could not go back. The next day I called in and quit. That was my last job in front of house. I have so much respect for the people who can serve long term, but after 6 years of my life putting up with shit like this, I was done. The meatball place shut down about 2 years after that. Just went out of business. But not before they had already done a number of other scummy things. They were on the local Chamber of Commerce, so they got it to be made illegal to feed the homeless. An old man was arrested for doing just that. Then Anonymous stepped in. It was a whole thing. There was an ABC News article about it. They not only were the main people backing that law, they proposed it in the first place because the homeless population was driving away the tourists that funded their business. People in Fort Lauderdale protested like mad when the police wouldn't release the guy. Then Anonymous stepped in to hack not only the police station systems, but all the traffic lights in the area. I was trying to get to class that day, and I couldn't because there was nowhere to go. Cars were locked in and all the bridges, so boats couldn't pass either. They had us held in traffic hostage for almost 4 hours that day. They also made a valiant effort toward abolishing minimum wage in the city. But that's a federal law they couldn't get away with, thank goodness. Their logic was that they should be the ones to determine what their employees are worth. 3. Not a serving shift tonight, but boy was tonight interesting. Was supposed to hostess, only to get a text telling me they needed me to food run. Whatever, no problem. Show up, turns out I'm the expo. Okay, whatever, I can do it. Then I take a look at the reservations. We were screwed. Way too many reservations for the tables we have with COVID and all. And way too many during multiple time frames, like 7 reservations at 5, for example. Looks like everybody is getting screwed tonight, but at least I have 2 runners tonight. Set up everything for service, and my boss tells me I only have 1 runner. Okay, might be a little tight, but we've done busy nights before. Turns out, it was the girl's 2nd shift running, ever, at our restaurant. Immediately, nope out to my manager, and some things get moved around and a different girl whose experience takes over running. Service has started, and it's clearly going to be a busy night. So more stuff gets moved around, and now I'm back to running, which I'm fine with. Things are getting busier, and while running food, I see our lobby is full of people waiting to be sat because we have no open tables. And it's super bad because these are all reservations too. A bit later, as I'm waiting for a server to finish up at the table to tell him something, a lady comes up and asks me, who has no indication of a high-ranking status symbol, if I'm the manager. I say no. I would be happy to grab him for her, though. She says, "Yes, bring him to that table over there," and points to her table, as if I didn't make eye contact with her the whole time she got up from the table and walked over. Manager was alerted, server informed, and I was back to running. I was bringing food out to a table, when I noticed a guy that had been at a table in the section I was going to, at a server station for that section. He was off. You could tell from a distance he just looked like he really did not want to be there, and it was obvious to me that he was trying to pay the bill in jet, which I'm assuming he did directly after. I walk by the station into the section and look over to the table he was at, and the girl he was with is still there. Do a double take, and there are tears coming down the lady's face, but she's not like full-on sobbing. But then she starts pushing stuff off the table, and I'm not exaggerating, like a pissed-off cat. Suddenly, the bread boarding off the table, then the menus, and then a glass of water, and one other one in particular. My manager is pretty much in step with me going over food I was delivering belonged to the table over, and he gets to her table and asks her what's going on. We were so busy at this point, I didn't have time to stay and snoop, so I headed back to the kitchen. When I come out with the food the next couple times, I get glimpses of this lady being sat in our lobby looking pissed. I asked my manager later, and he said she was drunk and that her mom and dad came and got her. Which was weird because I thought she looked like she was in her 30s. My headcanon is that she pre-gamed the date and was able to hide it well. She seemed fine when I ran their food out to them. Rest of the night was so busy it was a blur, just a weird night overall. 4. I've only been working at this restaurant for a little over 2 months. But recently, I've started working more lunch shifts. And with all our COVID restrictions lifted, the restaurant is operating at full capacity. This week has probably been the worst. Today I was working lunch by myself, with 3 servers on. The norm, as far as I've seen here, is 2 to 3 servers for lunch, and more would arrive later in the day for dinner. So I thought it wouldn't be too bad. Well, guests wouldn't stop coming in bursts today, and I typically never go on a wait during lunch. So I had to keep seating my servers until they consistently had about 6 tables throughout the shift. At one point, I felt like I couldn't seat them anymore, so I tried to tell the next party that it would be 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, they got exasperated with me and started complaining that there were empty tables everywhere, asking me if they could sit at the high tops as if that would make a difference. I'm quite introverted and I kinda lack communication skills when I feel stressed, so I only spoke as little as possible just to get them off my back. However, over half the parties I told that there would be a short wait got upset with me, and nearly all of them had something to say, whether it was about needing more workers, not having the time to wait, etc., etc. At some point, one of my coworkers came up to me and said I couldn't go on a wait during lunch, which I understood to some extent because some guests come during the lunch break at work. But I definitely didn't want my servers to take 7 tables each. I ended up having to seat all the parties that were waiting, and my manager had to come up to help run food. When she passed me, she said I could go on wait if I had to. I was so confused about what to do, but ended up continuing to put people on wait until other tables got up. At this point, I was absolutely stressed out, running around bussing tables, wiping them down, helping the servers where I could. All the while taking the heat from guests that had to wait. Because I was the only hostess, I can't see who's at the front all the time. I'm not able to be constantly staring at the door when I'm stacking dishes or in the back unloading everything into a dish pit. If it took me longer than 3 minutes to get up front to see who was there, guests would get upset. It didn't help that it was hotter than normal inside, and I was sweating like a pig. I felt completely ridiculous. I hated to double or triple seat the servers, but I also couldn't stand when guests got upset at me for things that I felt like were out of my control. I felt like I was a child being scolded, and I guess I kind of was. I'm only 18 years old, and there were fully grown adults yelling at me. Not to mention on Sunday, I was trying to explain to this man that I couldn't seat him where he wanted to go. We just sat that server's section, but he interrupted me and yelled at me to take off my mask because he couldn't understand me. I used to think I had somewhat thick skin, but all of this has taken a toll on my mental health. I want to quit, but I don't think I'll be able to find another job soon enough. And I'm leaving in less than 2 months for college anyway. I've read much worse stories, and I'm not sure how some people deal with it, but I just really needed to get this off my chest. 5. A lady walks in to place her to-go order. She is curt with me, but I'm in a decent mood, so I'm able to let it roll off my shoulders. Aside from being snarky and a little bit condescending, she's also asking me a lot of questions about the menu. I am being far more patient and helpful with her than she probably deserves. But like I said, I was in a good mood that day. While she's handing me her card to pay for her food, she notices the frozen box of baklava in the cooler behind me. Every restaurant has that one thing that should be removed from the menu. This is that thing for us. The box reads, "Thaw and serve." It's dripping in high fructose corn syrup, and is probably the most unauthentic baklava you will ever eat in your life. I hate that we sell it, but we have been for years, and some customers are crazy about it. So there it rests. She begins trying to bond with me over this sad excuse for baklava and how cool it is that we sell it, what country it's from, and yada yada. Like I do with all other customers who try to comment something about this horrendous dessert, I simply smile and nod. Then out of nowhere, and quite aggressively, she asks me,
"What is the owner's name?"
The owner is a ghost. He is never at the restaurant. He has other obligations out of state that take up most of his time. He rarely communicates with me, let alone any of the other employees, and certainly not random customers. I know this might sound like he's neglectful, but the restaurant has really good managers and everything runs smoothly. Anyway, I have known him for a while, and am aware of how much he values his privacy. I know I wouldn't want anyone giving out my name willy-nilly, so I apply those same principles to this situation. What a fool I am. I politely attempted to avert her question by responding, "Oh, you wouldn't know him." Because she literally fucking wouldn't. No, this answer simply won't do. She asks me with her condescending tone,
"Why do you think I wouldn't know him?"
At this point, I feel incredibly awkward. Why does this lady need to know the owner's name this badly? I'm trying to be polite and brush her off, and she's not taking the hint. My palms are getting sweaty, my chest is getting those stupid red splotches on it that it does when I'm getting flustered, and my mind is going a mile a minute. I tell her, well, he's not a celebrity or anything, because I'm still thinking she wouldn't know him, and what could telling her his name possibly get her, except now she knows his name, which is creepy and weird. The lady asks me again,
"Okay, but why do you think I wouldn't know him?"
Jesus fucking Christ, lady. I fumble over my words a bit, and what comes out of my dumb mouth? Well, he's Bulgarian. Thinking by saying this, she can just assume I know him better than she does, which I do, and that he does in fact spend most of his time with other Bulgarians, which he does. Hagrid has entered the chat. I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that. She flips her shit. How dare I assume she doesn't know anyone from Bulgaria? She knows loads of people from Bulgaria. In fact, half her friends are Bulgarian. The other half are from other exotic and obscure countries. She has the most diversified group of friends on this side of the Mississippi, and how dare I accuse her of something otherwise? I don't know, she goes on like this for a minute while I watch, regretting ever even getting out of bed this morning. So in a pathetic attempt to get her to hush up about all the different ethnicities of the people she apparently knows, I tell her the owner's name, and then ask her if she knows him. Of course she doesn't. Everything finishes in eerie silence. She fills out the receipt and even tips me $5. I figured I was off the hook. A week or so later, a lady calls asking to speak to the owner. A request usually only reserved for spammers. I offer my standard response. The owner isn't in right now. If it's important, I can take a message. She says no, she needs to speak directly to the owner, and it's regarding one of our employees and ethics. I'm wondering, ethics? Who in the hell did what now? Unsatisfied with my reply, she asks me for his personal phone number. I tell her I am not at liberty to give out that information. She is getting irate now. She demands his email address. I respond the same way. This stuff is private information. I just don't give it out to anyone who calls without any context whatsoever. She angrily hangs up the phone on me. A few days later, a very well-articulated 5-paragraph review pops up on Yelp, calling upon the owner to consider the ideologies and worldview of the people he hires, and that I am impetuous and unenlightened. I've never been so thoughtfully insulted before. I just really wanted to get my side of the story out there because, like most negative reviews, they are written to be quite biased towards the customer. I'm sorry, lady. I should have just told you that I didn't know who the owner was. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Spinning Plates, episode 143. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, hell, you know what, even if you did enjoy the video, help a freezer out. Share the video around, like, comment, subscribe, and you'll be surprised how much that helps the videos get seen. Interesting thing I've also noticed is the more people that watch a particular video, say I do a neckbeard video, I always notice a little bit of an uptick on the video I do the following day. Because neckbeard, although they don't do as well as they used to do, they're still one of the better performers for me. And it's an odd thing. It's almost like it's, oh, that video did well, we should give your other videos a little bit of a push. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but it seems to be. Okay, so if you could hit the subscribe button, and if you get bored with me, unsubscribe. That's okay, I really won't be offended. I mean, it's not like I'm going to show up at your house after you leave me for that bitch Susan Trevor. You think I didn't see the way you were looking at her? You think I didn't know it was her? Yes, I know. No, you can't take the dog with you. I'm keeping the dog and renaming him Mr. Woofs. He always loved me more anyway. Yes, I am still talking to your mother. She always loved me more too. What was I doing? Oh yes, outro. Anyway, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.